guys, thanks for tuning in. Today we got a little repair work to do. I have this mandolin. It's not a great expensive mandolin, but it sounds pretty good and I use it for recording. And unfortunately, if you take a look, the nut cracked here, which was disappointing. String tension, just basically cracked this. It looks like it's a plastic nut, so it's not very good. But again, it's not a great instrument, but it's a pretty nice sounding instrument. And I figured for 13 bucks I could get a new nut and replace it myself. So first thing I did was I measured the nut, and I found this company called TUSQ, TUSQ, and they make these synthetic ivory tusks, nuts, if you will. They make them for guitars and all types of mandolin. So this is the one I bought. I measured it out, and this is the one that was closest to the mandolin that I have. And they have some information on the website on how to measure it, so it's pretty easy. But you just take a small ruler and you measure it by millimeters, the height, the width, and you get the closest one that you can. And again, I think it was like $13 or something like that, so it wasn't that expensive. And I'll be using that and some pretty simple tools. So I've got this box cutter, because I'll need that to score to get the old nut off, and I'll show you how to do that. Sandpaper, we'll use that to adjust the new nut to make sure it fits. Crazy glue, once we get it to fit, we're going to just put 2 small drops of crazy glue in there to hold the nut in place. And a hammer, and we'll use that to take the old nut off. And then and also a new set of strings. And I could try to do this with the strings on, but it's a small instrument. It might get kind of dicey to, tough to do that. These strings are kind of had it anyway, so I just bought a new set of strings to replace it. So the first thing we'll do here is show you how to take the old nut off, and I'll fade out here, get the strings off, and then we'll come back and do that. So see you in a few seconds. Okay, so I got the strings off, and I noticed that the frets are pretty grimy. I play this quite a bit, so they've got some sweat and other crap that builds up on there. So it's pretty easy to do that. This looks like it's a rosewood fretboard. I'm just going to take some steel wool, light steel wool, very light steel wool, and some boar oil, which is basically the same oil that you use in brass instruments. So we'll just basically lightly steel wool these frets, going with the grain, not against the grain, because you don't want to scratch it. So go with the grain, get the grime off, and then just put a very small dab of oil in there and rub it in with a rag or something. So let's work on doing that here. So we'll just go like this with the grain. Just rub each of the frets, and you can see I got steel wool building up there, so I kind of like to keep that on the fretboard, so I can just put that in the garbage when I'm done. So those are cleaning up pretty nice. All right, so I basically dusted off, and I could use like this air in a can thing to dust it off too. All right, get all the crap off there. Okay, and now I got a paper towel. And I got the boar's oil, so I'm just going to take like a small drop of this stuff. Just a little drop on each fret, not much. That's it, just a small drop. It's pretty simple. And then what we'll do is just use the paper towel to rub that oil into the wood. You can see it get nice and dark, which is nice. Now, I don't recommend doing this if you're not a professional tech person, and if you have a real, expensive mandolin. If I owned a, $6,000 mandolin, I would not be doing this. I'd have someone probably do it for me. But this is a, $125 mandolin, or whatever it was. It's pretty cheap, so I'm not too worried about you know, making a mistake on it. Well, you could smell the oil, but you could see the fretboard. I mean, I don't know if you can see it on the video, but I could see it here. The fretboard's definitely cleaner. It's looking a little bit darker and nicer. It'll just help preserve it. So that's about it. I also noticed here that you got this, if you look at this nut here, get that focused in. You see it's sort of starting to chip here too. So this is really a kind of a crappy nut, which is what I would expect on it. There's a little piece of chipped off right there. I would expect that on an instrument like this. So now let's work on trying to get the nut off. Okay, so now we're going to deinstall the old crappy nut. Now again, warning, if you've got a real expensive mandolin and you're not sure what you're doing, I don't recommend you doing this on your own. Take it to a professional. But if you've got, you know, an entry-level mandolin like this one and you want to try it, that's fine. So here's what we're going to do. We're basically going to use this sharp edge to score right along here, okay, so that it'll break this, the glue seal or the laminate seal, so we can get this nut off. So let me try to do that. See how that works here. So we're just going to go slowly just along the edge of that nut, like that. Not too, you don't have to go too deep, but I can already feel it cutting. You can see that there. Okay, so I just basically scored along the line there. And I could feel this, the glue breaking. So hopefully that is enough to pry it off. I'm just going to stick my blade in here so see if I have it loose. I guess not. So just give that another scoring. Okay, that should do it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hammer and some sort of block. I guess I'll just use this. Put that up against the nut like this. Okay, hit it with the hammer. Okay, and basically knock that nut right out of the guitar or the mandolin. So let's see if we can give that a try here. So we'll put this thing like this. Just tap it lightly. See if we can get this nut out. There you go. Gone. Pretty easy. Okay, and there's the old nut. You see, there's the chipping there, and it's just basically a piece of garbage, right? So if I compare this to the new nut, looks like I did pretty good with my pretty good with my measuring here. Just about the same. I might not even have to sand it. I do have this sandpaper here just in case. Get the oil out of the way. I have the sandpaper here just in case I have to, you know, just trim it a little bit to get it in there, maybe the height or the width. So let's try to fit it in there and see how it looks. So you're going to do it with the like that, okay? You definitely want a little bit of height for the strings here. Let's just see. Okay, so I'll get my measuring tool. And we'll measure that. So the old nut was in there, and it basically had, I take my measurements here. It looks like it's about 2 millimeters in height. But you want to make sure you get that right so you don't get like intonation problems. But again, it's not an expensive instrument, so I'm not too worried about that. We'll have to check that later. But yeah, I'm gonna basically call it 2 millimeters. Actually, it's 3 millimeters. So let's see the old one. So the old one's 3 millimeters in height from the fretboard to the top of the nut. So let's check out the new one. So make sure that surface is pretty clean in there. Looks like it's pretty clean. I gotta take this little chip out of here. Leftover remnant from the old one, so I can get a clean flat surface. There you go, it's coming out there. Just real slow, just picking it out real slow. There you go. Get all the clean, just clean all that out, all the old glue. Make it a clean, flat surface before measuring the new one. Here's my spray. It looks pretty clean. So again, disclaimer, this is my first time doing this, so don't hit me with negative comments about not being a professional lutherer, because I'm not. I'm just a guy who doesn't want to spend $50 on paying someone to put a nut in a relatively inexpensive instrument. So that's really nice and clean there. All around the edges. I can see it's pretty flat. Okay, maybe we need to take some sandpaper, get it in there, and you can see it's nice and clean. Okay. Okay, that's pretty good. So let's take the new one. Let's lay that nut in there. Now it looks like I've got a little bit of edge issue on each side, so I may have to sand off just a little tad. I'm not going to worry too much about it, because if I put the old one in, back in, I mean it flared out the edges a little bit too, so I'm not going to be really worry too much about a precision fit. Now the good news is the string lines seem to line up, or the string grooves seem to line up pretty well, which is an important thing. So certainly want the outer strings on the fretboard, right? Because you don't want them playing outside the fretboard. So, so that's basically good. So let's do some measurements here. We'll take this thing, and you can't see this on the camera, so you're gonna have to trust me. It is the same height as the other one, 3 millimeters. So I'm pretty confident that I'm pretty lucky here. I don't have to build this up or anything to get it the same height. Just double measure here. Yeah, it's 3 millimeters. So what I'm going to do here is I'm basically just going to I don't have to sand the bottom at all. Okay. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to sand the sides just a little bit. Okay, to take off this little edge here and to make it fit a little bit better. So what I'll do here is show you how I do that. Move the mandolin out of the way here. And what we'll do is just take the sandpaper, take the new nut, and just lightly stroke it like that. I don't want to do. I just did 10. Okay. Then we'll do 10 on the other side. Okay. That's it, and then we'll try to fit it again. That's looking pretty good. Look at it from both sides. So there's the one side. I don't know if you could see that. You can see it's a little bit over the edges. I could probably trim it a little bit more, which is what I'll do. But I definitely want those strings lined up right on the frets there. You see, it's going to be cutting it close, but again, I'm not too worried about it. It's not a great instrument. But let's do a little bit more sanding. We'll do 10 more on each side. Well, that's looking better. Give you a look at that. Okay. Hopefully you can see that. But I think I'm going to go with that. I don't think I'm going to go any deeper than that. Now it is a little bit. I do have a little play here. You can see right here. This groove is a little wider than the nut, so there's a little bit of play. But I'm going to put crazy glue in there, so it'll glue in. And if I was going to refinish this, I'd probably put some lacquer here, but I'm not going to do that because again, this is a quick fix by a guy who's never done it before for an instrument that's not too expensive. Again, just a disclaimer: if you have a real expensive mandolin, take it to a professional to do this. Okay, I'm pretty close to being ready to go here and setting this in here, and I'll just change the camera angle so you could see how I glue it in. Alright, so I'm getting ready to glue it in here, and basically what I have is my Super Maximum Bond Crazy Glue. Okay, or you can use any contact glue like this. This is nice because it's like a gel, so it's easy to use. And one thing you want to make sure of here is you want to prop the mandolin up, because the nut, gravity will tend to pull it away like that, okay? And obviously you don't want it like that when you glue it in. It'll be kind of messed up. So one thing is, when I do glue it, I'm going to hold it for a few seconds to make sure it stays in place. And once the bond is sealed, then we'll just let it dry for a little bit. So let's take a crack at getting this glued in. So let's give it a shot here. So I've got my, get that so you can see it. I'm ready to go. The surface is nice and clean. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically put 2 dabs of glue evenly distributed in the wood and on the wood on the instrument here. So I'll put one there, small dab there, and a small dab there. Maybe we'll put one in the middle just to be sure. That's it. Okay. Close the glue up. Okay. Now here's the moment of truth. We'll take the thing, the nut, place it in place. Okay, make sure that it's lined up properly on each side. You feel it with your fingers. Okay, and just hold it in place there for a few seconds. Okay, while the glue sets up. I'm just going to hold it here for about a minute, just to at least a minute, just to make sure that it's sealed. So let's we'll be back in a second. Okay, once again, Crazy Glue works wonders, and I've got my new nut installed. See there? Okay, it's looking pretty good. It's not perfectly in line with the fretboard, but the other one wasn't either. So, I'm not too worried about that. Again, it's not an expensive instrument, but certainly the string lines are, and that should be okay. And I mean, it looks a little different on camera, but definitely I can tell you by looking at it here, they look just fine. They're just on the edge, which is just about where they should be. So, show you the old nut compared to the new nut. And there's the old nut compared to the new nut. Yeah, the strings are definitely a little bit wider. The spacing for the strings a little bit wider, not too much, but that's okay. We'll have to live with that. And that's how to replace a nut. So let's get the strings on there. I'm going to let it sit for about an hour just to make sure everything bonded on there right. And then we'll put the strings on there, we'll tune it up, and give it a shot. Man, this thing is really beat up. Look at that. What a piece of garbage. Plastic. That's why it's that's why it's a $100 instrument. But now it's got a nice synthetic bone. It actually feels like bone. It's kind of cool. Synthetic bone for 13 bucks, and a little Crazy Glue and a couple set of strings, and we'll be in good shape. So let's get the strings on it. We'll try it out. Okay, well, I noticed a problem. I had the nut in place and I started to put the strings on, and I realized that my measurements weren't right, and the nut was actually not high enough, the new nut. Alright, so actually I'm going to backtrack here. What I did was I actually deinstalled the new nut again. So I wanted to just compare the old nut to the new nut, and basically I noticed that there is about a millimeter, maybe a 2.5 millimeter difference in size and height between the two. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the Crazy Glue. Okay, I'll turn the mandolin around here. Actually, see, I started to put the strings on when I thought of this. What I'm going to do is I've started to just build up the area here with a little Crazy Glue. Okay, just to build up about a millimeter so that the nut just sits a little higher in there. Okay, so just just basically small little bit of Crazy Glue, just spread it out evenly using the tip. Okay, and let that set up. Okay, and then you may have to sand that to make it flat, but it's it's an easy way to build up the area. And then I feel comfortable that the new nut is the right height. So let's let that set up, and then we'll reinstall the new nut, which is right here, and then we'll get the strings on, and hopefully everything will be okay. Alright, so I used the crazy glue to build up the area here, and I reinstalled the nut, as you can see, and I built it up a little bit more, about 1 millimeter, which actually puts it about the same height as this one. You can see, look at this thing's cracking. What a piece of garbage. Anyway, so I probably should have done a better job of measuring it up front. You know, I had to take a step back and reinstall it, but that's, you know, what happens when you're not a professional luthier. So basically, I should be good to go here. I'm going to let this thing set up a little bit, and then we'll get the strings on it, and we'll try her out. So there you go. Back in a few minutes, or a few seconds, I should say. All right. So there was one thing I forgot to mention was most guys recommend that you put a little graphite in these grooves, just to keep the strings sliding evenly. You can just use a pencil, what I've got right here, and basically what you do is you take the pencil and you basically use the pencil to put a little graphite in the grooves there. That's something I picked up from some people online and videos and stuff. I mean, you know, basically it makes your it just discolored my nut a little bit, but you know, at least the strings will slide easily using the graphite. So you may want to sharpen the pencil a little sharper than I had there, but that's the whole idea of it. Get a little graphite in the groove, just a little bit, to help the strings slide. So now let's get the strings on. Alright, so I just put the first string on there, and fits pretty well. As you can see, it's lined up with the fretboard pretty well. Pretty happy about that. And as I went through and tested, no fret buzz. The action's a little bit high, but you know, I can adjust that with the bridge if I want to. But basically, it looks like I'm going to be okay here with my my nut height, and the nut is holding strong there. So let's get the rest of the strings on. We'll try it out. Alright, so I got the strings on there, and the nut, I'll show you that, seems to be holding just fine. There it is. Okay. A little darkened by the graphite, but that's okay. Strings are holding just fine. One mistake I did make, I think, was I probably could have installed it a little towards the top here, because this the bottom string here is a little bit, you know, it's not the best angle to the tuner, but that's okay. You know, again, let's remember, last time for the disclaimer, my alternative here was to throw this thing away, because, you know, paid like $100 for it, $120, whatever it was, and the nut was broken, it was unplayable. So I wanted to fix it. $13 and a little work, and now I got a playable instrument. Let's see what it sounds like. Alright, so I got it all tuned up. Let's see what it sounds like. Alright, sounds pretty good, no buzzing. I checked all the frets, it sounds pretty good. I lucked out with the nut height, and now I got a playable instrument. You know, basically my alternative was to toss this thing in the garbage because the nut was broken. $13 or whatever it was, some crazy glue, a little work, and now I got a playable instrument. And last time warning, if you got an expensive instrument, I would not recommend trying it on your own. I'd recommend getting someone who knows what they're doing, and you know, having it done professionally. But for a cheap instrument like this, now I can play. Well, I can't play very well, but and there you go. So I hope that was helpful. Please rate and comment and subscribe, and really appreciate you watching. Have a great day.